Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of But What If I Soar? I am your host, Dominique, licensed professional counselor and owner of Free to Be Counseling Services, LLC.
And I am your other co host, Deveron, Social MacGyver, and I am a licensed social worker as well as a licensed life coach. Welcome back.
Yes, so we are entering into, I think, our last episode, if I'm not mistaken, of the relationship series. This week, we are going to dive into friendships and the dynamics of those relationships, which if I think about it, I think those tend to get overlooked because I think we focus so much on like outside of our family. We focus so much on our romantic relationships. If you're a heterosexual, let's kind of if you're in a heterosexual relationship, I think in my personal opinion, I think we're socialized, at least women are socialized, those who identify as women. I think we're socialized to just kind of prioritize our romantic relationships. So I'm really excited to talk about friendships and all of that. I kind of went on like a deep dive a few months ago after, and we'll kind of talk about it after like a situation, and really just kind of started to explore like some literature and some information about women friendships and just friendships in general. So I'm excited to talk about this topic.
I'm excited too. I think, friendships are one of the most important relationships that you can have with people. You need to you have your romantic relationships, but I also think that having friendships is also essential into having a
Yeah.
well balanced life. So I think that
Yeah.
this will be, really interesting to kind of get in and dive in and unpack. So I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Same. So we will touch briefly just on ways that we've soared in the last, well, if you're following along, we're recording this about a week out from our last episode. So we're going to just talk a little bit about ways that we've soared in the last, oh, I'm sorry, not what ways we've soared. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. One high and one low from the week. So everyone, you want to start?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of briefly talk about it. So one way that or one high that I had is um as I talked about during our last podcast, I am preparing for our vow renewal, which I'm really excited for. And, because of having lost my mom, within the last couple of years, I always get a little bit anxious and nervous when there is like some type of special event coming up because I know that that is going to bring a lot of attention around who is missing, right? I never used to have those type of feelings because I really thankfully hadn't lost anyone significant in my life until like a couple years ago. And so now when I have these events, it's automatic, like who's not going to be in attendance, and not because they have something else to do or a prior commitment, but because they like literally are not here anymore.
Yeah.
And so you know, trying to just use my coping skills for that. But one of the things I think I kind of talked about was just how important and how much of a role my mom and grandmother would play on events. And I'm not someone who's really good at asking for help or being vulnerable and saying, like, look, I'm struggling here. And I had been like doing a lot of like deep thinking and just like, trying to process and kind of like talking to my mom and just saying, like, I really would hope that you show up in some type of way that I could just feel your presence, and just help me get
Yeah.
through this time. And I will say, I don't know what was going on. If she was just like, girl, I got you. But like this week, I've had so many people who are, coming to the vow renewal reach out to me and just like, what do you need? Like, can I help out in any
Mm,
way? I was planning on doing this. Like, I mean, just like the most random things of like, I was gonna do this and like, is that good? And like, just like the timing was just like perfect. You know what I'm saying? Like I was in my
yeah.
feelings and just getting like text messages and calls. And it was like, okay, mom, like I know you were listening to me. I know
Yeah.
that, I needed this. I didn't ask for it, outspoken, but it was really good. Like, it was a very big high, and it just reminded me, like, you have a village, like, you have people who are willing to help and do so much, but you have to put yourself out there. Like, you have to be vulnerable. And like we talked about in our last podcast, you can't hold people to expectations that you are not making clear, right? Like,
Yeah,
that's just
very
unfair to
true.
them. So, is a very good high,
Hmm.
and I will say, like, I didn't have any lows. Like, I think, with the grief, I think that that's something that is there and it's present. Like I said, my anxiety has been increased, but I won't say that that's a low because I know this is gonna sound weird, but I never wanna lose the grief of losing my mom. I want to feel
Yeah.
that. I
Hmm.
want to constantly miss her because you hear people talk about grief, and sometimes, I was talking to my niece and she was saying that sometimes she is forgetful of certain memories and and it hurts her feelings. She doesn't want to lose that. And so I want to constantly be reminded that I'm missing something. I don't ever want there to be a day where I don't think about what my mom would bring to that event or to that day or that moment. I kind of find comfort in that grief. So I'm very
Yeah.
happy with it. And I've learned to, use my coping skills and learn to float when I need to and learn to stand when I need to when those waves are a little bit heavier or a little bit, light. So I will say like that. That was a high. What about you?
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely glad that you, kind of tried to channel her in some way, and then almost immediately you got like such a big response. That has to feel good. This has to be such a challenging time while you're going through something so like special, right? This is 10 years is special, and to not be able to share that with your mom and your grandmother physically and your uncle and your people who you've lost, that has to be hard. But I'm glad that you caught the signs,
Yeah.
that she was sending you. Yeah. Well, today's my son's birthday, so
Woo,
that's a high for me.
woo. And he
He
didn't
is
bring me no
4. What'd
cupcake.
you say?
He didn't bring me a cupcake.
I
He was
he
adamant too.
I know, he's so funny. So he is 4 today, and wow, I just think back and I'm like, I remember when you were such a little
I
baby,
know.
like me coming home, me and my husband coming home. We what made having him so special was, I think traditionally, like when women have kids, they like want their mom or some woman figure with them. And that was the plan. And then right before we had him, my husband was like, maybe we should just take the first 2 weeks and just be us,
Mhm.
and that we figure this shit out. You know what I mean? Like not have people here, just like let it just be us. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think my father-in-law might have suggested that to him. And I
Mhm.
was a bit terrified by that initially, but I was like, this could be good. Okay, I'll let you take the lead here. You made a really good suggestion, so I'll let you take that. And it was such a great bonding experience for the both of us. Neither one of us have had children. It was our first child, and there's not a lot of like little kids around us either. So like I don't think we even really had some of those like instincts from just like being around little kids. I can say before I had him, I was like, I don't even know if kids like me because I just don't even be. I don't know if I be giving off the vibes. You know what I mean? So that part made it special, that we just had those first 2 weeks, and then like my mom came down the third week, and my mom always tells this story about how we clearly weren't getting any sleep, and my mom stayed up with Savon while we got sleep or whatever, and Irby always says like that's the best sleep I done got in like the 2 weeks, just even more, you know, because it was rough, you know what I mean? It was
Yeah.
rough, like not knowing what to expect when my milk came in, and not knowing what to expect with breastfeeding, and I mean it was just a lot, and I think what makes it so special is that I see myself changing as a person,
Mhm.
and I am very, dedicated and very adamant about being a particular type of mother. But I also see myself like turning into like just a different person, which, I think that this isn't the only experience where that happens, but I know just in my own personal experience, like I just see, so much change and so much like desire to be a good influence. And when I'm reading this book right now called Parenting from the Inside Out, and it's just such a like when I read the book, and it talks a lot about just like the development and like the brain and some nerdy shit, which I love. but like at the root of it, it's like if you can like solve and unpack your own childhood experiences, you show up to these experiences in such a better way. And
Mm-hmm.
I just feel so much privilege that I had time to really unpack and address some of my own shit before I had him. And I know a lot of parents don't really get that privilege. They don't get that opportunity for whatever reason, whether they, kind of made this decision haphazardly or, whatever led them to this experience. I just feel blessed and privileged that I recognize the importance of unpacking my own shit so that I can fuck my kid up. And the thing is, you can do everything right and, your kid
Mm-hmm.
still may feel some sense of dissatisfaction. But I think being
Mm-hmm.
able to unpack that and I think it'll give me space in those moments when he does. Well, let me back up because he tells me when he's dissatisfied all the time. So
I was about to
uh
say,
yeah,
he lets
he
you know.
already be running it down like, don't talk to me like that and don't touch me and I don't want to hear that. And 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 there are moments when it's such a process of unlearning because I find myself like addressing him in ways that I was addressed, and I know that's not the way I want to address him. And I'm always like, okay, let me go back because that's not. So
Mhm.
I just, I appreciate this opportunity to just be an intentional parent. And I know that a lot of parents just didn't have that language, that understanding, and I feel privileged and honored to be able to show up that way for him. Because I know a lot of kids don't get that. So it was nice celebrating him today. I went and got him cupcakes yesterday for his class, and like it was just a good day for him. I think like you could just tell he got so many phone calls a day, and it was just he was just excited and he like lit up like all day, and it just felt good to see that and watch that. So all in all, it was a good day. That was a high, and then no lows. I'm 2 for 2.
Woo-hoo!
No
A
lows.
win is
Everything
a
has been
win.
yeah, everything has been really good. So I I could complain, but I won't because I think everything has been pretty on the up and up. So yeah,
Good.
that's what's going on for me.
That's good. That's wonderful. I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear you're growing with
Hmm.
him,
Yeah.
that's the beauty, right? I
Yeah.
think that's what a lot of parents strive for is to grow with your child. Um,
Hmm. Yeah.
so as long as you are growing, you're not always going to be perfect, but I think as long as you keep that in the back of your mind that you guys are both growing and learning and
Hmm.
adjusting, you'll be great.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so too. I think so too.
So let's jump in to these questions. So, like we've done on every episode of this series thus far, we have come up with a list of questions to ask each other to unpack. So I am going to kick it off and let Dom answer first. So the first question is going to be centered around friendship, evolution, and I am going to ask you, Dom, to think about this and kind of let us know what your thoughts are. How
Okay.
have your friendships evolved over the years? And what significant life events or experiences have deepened your connections with your friends?
Hmm. I think that's a good question. I would say I have a set of friends from college, and then I have one friend that I like have from like middle school. No, we're still friends. And then I have like some friends that are like family, but not like blood. And I met one through her. So like I have like that set of friends. And then I have some friends from my first job outside of graduate school. And so what I would say is I guess the friends from middle school and college, they definitely evolved because, you know, when you're 13, 14 years old or 18, 19, 20 years old, I mean like you're still coming into your own in lots of ways. And so, I think that those relationships evolve because, as you age and as you engage in experiences, your outlook on things change. And so the way vision things, or the way you envision things change, and the way you process information changes, and like what you felt, I guess more to the point, what I thought and what I believed at 13, 14, 15, or 21 is not what I think at 36. You know what I mean? And it's nice to see if those friendships evolve as well. But the challenge with evolution of friendships is that sometimes they don't evolve, right? Sometimes you are with friends from all those years ago that haven't grown, right? That haven't, I don't want to say leveled up, but haven't grown, you know? And I hold this dichotomy a lot where it's like I want to always be growing or always be open to the possibility of growing. But I also want to hold this idea that like I'm not broken, I don't need to be fixed. I'm good the way I am. And I think it's important for me to do that because I am someone who struggles with perfectionism, and it's real easy for me to kind of fall back into like, constantly looking at myself and looking at how I can be better and do better and all that stuff.
Mm.
And so I think what experiences have changed my friendships in particular, motherhood, is I think is definitely I have friends right now who, all of our kids are, under 5 years old, you know what I mean? So we kind of have very similar experiences. And that's been a journey. Like, I don't even know how I would get through some of the challenges of motherhood if I didn't have my mom chat and like stuff like that. I mean, I think I appreciate that. And I couldn't have envisioned that like my friendships with those women would have evolved into what they have, after having kids. Marriage is another one, right? Most of my friends, I'd say I may have one or two close friends that aren't married, but most of my friends are married. So I think having friends who kind of are married and understand like the challenges of marriage, the challenges of like maintaining your own identity and also honoring your union and trying to like balance being an individual and also being someone who is committed to a long, long life with somebody else, right? A forever thing. Like that shit could be rough. And it's nice to have women who understand that. I'd say I'd say also career, right? I have a couple of friends work for or a couple of professional friends who are really I met them in a professional setting, but them is my girls. Like they're I just fuck with them. You know what I mean? It just so happened that I met them, you know what I mean, in a professional setting, but like many of them are in private practice. And I have one friend who we kind of started at the same time in our first job out of graduate school. She she's a little bit older than me. However, though, she and I like started our careers in counseling around the same time. And she's just like it's just she's such a breath of fresh air. She's so authentic, so real, like. And we just so happened to be kind of she started private practice a little bit before, like maybe 5 years before I did, and it wasn't taking off the way she wanted. And then like I was telling her like I'm really kind of thinking about pursuing this a little bit more, and she wasn't really happy with where her private practice was going. And she was like, okay, and she kind of started to make some shifts and changes in her private practice. And it was nice that we were kind of entering into something pretty similar at the same time. So again, I don't know. I think those experiences have definitely helped to deepen my connections with those women. So yeah, I mean, I would say those things are what have been significant in my time with those women, and what has really helped to grow our friendship. Yeah. What about you?
I think kind of like mirroring what you say. I think, all of these different experiences, I feel like the more experiences I have with someone, the more closer I get with them.
Hmm.
Especially in situations where I'm able to be more vulnerable, they're able to be more vulnerable. So, I'm someone who is very adamant of growing in some manner, and I like to surround myself with
Hmm.
people who are also growing.
Yeah.
And not saying that you have to just be out here like, doing the most, but I really like to surround myself with people who are not just content with, the way things are. I feel like the
Hmm.
world is constantly changing around us, and we should always be trying to evolve and just do better than we did yesterday. Um And so, like, with all of these different changes that happen amongst us, I think that that definitely impacts the relationships that I have with these individuals. And I will say, like, I have female friends, but I also have some male friends. Not too much, not too much though. But I have
Yeah.
some male friends that are just like just really good and just like motivate me. And I have a friend who we started off as he was my supervisor. And when I first met him, I just knew like we just meshed really well. And I was like, look, you got to be my supervisor. I don't care what anybody says, like, make it happen. And he made it happen. And then like he just was like such, like, you ever meet someone who's just like, they're just such a great person. Like, the vibe is just
Mhm.
good. They are constantly, like, not just, like, selfishly thinking about themselves, but literally where they will be in a room with a bunch of people and opportunities will be talked about, and they will make sure to mention your name or make sure to
Mhm.
tell you about an opportunity. Like, that's just
Yeah.
who this person is, and just so thankful for him. And he's just a nice guy. And
Yeah.
that is a friendship that started off professionally, but now I like literally tell him, like, I'll reach out to him and tell him something that's happened in my personal life, and I'll professional life, and just so many different avenues. And the same with him. And I think that that's definitely helpful, right? And then
Mhm.
also just having relationships where, again, you go from the dating life to now you have a partner. And you want, not saying that all of my friends have to be married, right? Because I don't think that that's realistic, but I also
Right.
like having like a mixture of friends that can understand the different things that are going on in my life, right?
Mhm.
Um, I feel like it's important to have that balance.
Yeah.
The same thing with professional people. I want friends that are out here trying to get at things, right? Like, I don't
Mhm.
want to have, where I'm so motivated and really focused to be the best in my professional life, and I
Mhm.
have a surrounding myself with people who are just like sitting on the couch all day, not doing anything. Like,
Right.
no, no ambition, nothing. And again, like,
Mhm.
I think that there's seasons, right? There's seasons where you're gonna be on top of your game, and there's gonna be seasons when you might need a little bit more support. And I'm not saying that those people, you just like kind of write them off. But
Right.
if I hold myself to a high standard, I want my friends to also hold themselves to a high standard. But I also want us to hold each other to a high standard, right?
Yeah.
In every
Yeah.
avenue that we're in, right? If I'm in a low place, like, I want my friends to come and be in that low place and support me, but I'm gonna do the same to you. But I also don't want you to make excuses for me. Like, I want you to hold me on to these expectations. So I think, like,
Mhm.
just different things. I went from not having any kids to now I have 3 kids,
Yeah.
and 3 kids who are not like babies. Like, I got
Right.
a kid who's about to she's a senior right now, getting ready to go into college. And I have 2 boys who, are, one just entered middle school, and all the things that that brings about. So I like to have a mixture of friends who can understand, and not saying that they have to exactly go through those situations, but have some context, and be able to have discussions around it. And I
Yeah.
think that that's important for friendships to really evolve throughout
Mhm.
whatever you're facing is
Yeah.
key.
I think that's a good point. I think that having a mixture of friends is helpful. I'm not one of those people who think like, oh, you're married, you don't need to have single friends. I don't really. I think it just happened that way because I think even like my husband, most of his friends are either married or in long-term relationships. There's a few who aren't, but for the most part, most of his friends, the majority of them are. And same for me, but I don't think that was done intentional. I think it just kind of happened that way. But I definitely am open to having like I wouldn't write somebody off because they weren't married or they were, in them streets. Like I mean, I wouldn't, you know what I mean? Because that doesn't have to be my life, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and those experiences don't mean that like it doesn't negate like other ways in which we could be connected, you know what I mean?
yeah.
So, I think that's a good point, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think, again, we all have different seasons that we go through, and I think that that's important. I will say, like, I have some friends who are single, and I hear their single stories and things like that. And I think the important content behind that is boundaries, like healthy boundaries. I could not be in a full friendship with someone who was in their single era and being disrespectful to my relationship, right?
Mhm.
And I obviously feel the same way for my partner. His friendships, he has friends in different, you know, seasons. And as long as they are respectful and understand the boundaries that we have in place, I'm cool. Like,
Mhm.
everybody goes through different things. Some people don't want to be married. That's completely fine. Like, I'm not saying that
Yeah,
you have to
yeah.
be, some people don't want to be in a relationship. I was one of those people. I didn't want to be in a relationship. So it's completely fine. But as long as you're respectful, I
Yeah.
think that's the other thing. Like, I have friends who don't want to have kids. Like, they are adamant
Mhm.
they're not kid people. That's fine.
Mhm. Yeah.
I respect your wishes, whatever. As long as you are not disrespecting what I have going on, right? Like, I think that that's
Right.
important. And that's a big component of having a thriving friendship is like understanding what our boundaries are, just because something is for me doesn't mean that it has to be for you, but you need to respect that, right? For us
Mhm.
to be able to have a friendship. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So the next question I'm going to ask you is it's about navigating conflict. And so share a story about a time when you faced a significant disagreement or conflict with a friend. How did you handle it and what did it teach you about resolving conflicts within friendships?
I was trying to think about this question a little bit. I think, when I was much younger, middle school, high school, I felt like there was a lot of conflicts within my friend group. Silly conflicts, oh,
Yeah.
you like this boy and, or you're hanging out, everyone had their quote unquote best friend. And then, of course, like if your best friend was hanging a little bit too closely with another person, you felt like, your best friend was now in jeopardy. So, like, just catty little things.
Mm,
So, those now that I look back at it, very silly arguments. So
yeah.
obviously at that age, I thought the world was ending, right? Like I thought that those
Yeah.
were like, what do you mean? Like, that's not my friend anymore. Like I can't talk to her. But as an adult, I think more so conflict that I have had has been more so under misunderstanding.
Mm,
And I will say misunderstanding of maybe not fully knowing what someone is going through,
mhm.
and feeling like they are short with you or they're not really as engaged, just whatever, just not kind of lining up. You guys are not in line like you used to. And I will say, I will say, I've not always been great with conflict in friendships because
Mm,
I will say there is a level of, if we're having conflict in a friendship, if we're both willing to unpack it and figure out where we go from here, I feel like that's something that we can move forward with.
yeah.
But if there's conflict and I'm the only one showing up to try to come up with what the issue is and come up with the resolution, I don't really like to entertain that conflict. And I know that sounds really bad, but I'm someone who
Does
really
it?
I mean, it might sound bad to some people listening, but I will say like
Yeah.
I'm one of those people like I understand that misunderstandings happen, right? Like
All the
again,
time. All the time.
I could be feeling some type of way, you could be feeling some type of way. We're not fully saying what's going on. Again, we are individuals first and there could just be a whole bunch of stuff going on. And instead of having that dialogue, it could be where, I understand that something has went amiss, but I feel like if you're willing to kind of like just go off of that feeling and not really have dialogue with me, a part of me like looks at it like, do I really need to entertain this friendship any longer? If you are
Yeah.
so caught up on misunderstanding me, and not like where I'm saying like people have to never look at you in a negative light or feel some type of way, because that's not accurate. Like, you're going to have these issues with your friends at some point in time. If you've never had a
Mhm.
conflict with your friend, y'all ain't really friends. I don't care what nobody says, you ain't really friends, because there's
Mm.
going to be some type of misunderstanding at some point, but it's how you handle that really matters. And I will say, like, I have two really, really good friends. And although we've never had like serious conflict, I mean, we've had like little catty, stupid things. One of the things that has always been impressive to me and really made me want to fight for the friendship and be engaged with all the different changing and moving parts is like the ability to always come back and say, like, something is amiss, like,
Yeah.
what's going on, like, let's talk about this. I am more open to dealing with that type of conflict and trying
Mhm.
to figure out a solution than dealing with anyone who's like, there's conflict, I'm not going to talk to you, you're wrong, I don't have nothing to say to you. But not only that, but also going to other people and telling them that I'm wrong, and telling them about the
Girl.
issues, but not coming to me. You don't. We're not as close as I thought we were. Like, we're not
Mhm.
on that level that I initially thought, and so maybe the friendship wasn't what I thought it was, and that's
Mm.
fine too.
Yeah.
Like, you know. What about you?
So, kind of similar. I mean, I didn't even really think about when you were talking about like high school and college, and I didn't even really think about that. I was more so thinking about now in my life, but I think that's a really good point, right? That I would just say, I will preface this by saying that I am historically have not been good at conflict. I am a habitual avoider. um, I will avoid conflict at all costs. So when you say you're not really friends if you don't have conflict, I think that I have often avoided sharing my true feelings to some of my friends about maybe ways in which I've been talked to, or maybe ways in which I feel like I've been treated, because of the challenge of the fear of rejection and abandonment. I don't think I knew it at the time, but I think the fear of conflict, not having the skills to navigate conflict appropriately, and I think not being able to like emotionally regulate after the conflict, all those things have been enough for me to say, fuck it. I'm not even going to say nothing. But what it does is it leaves you feeling not whole and not complete, right? Like, it leaves you feeling like that something don't feel right. That you had this issue. You didn't say anything. That's not what you wanted to do, but you didn't have these skills and you didn't have the capacity to like approach the situation in a way that would get your needs met, right? So the way you get your needs met is just to avoid. But what I've learned is that avoiding only prolongs it. It limits the suffering, or I'm sorry, when you avoid something, it feels like it's you're addressing it, or it feels like, why am I tongue tied? What am I trying to say? Like, when you avoid something, you're not really solving the problem, but
Mhm.
it feels easier, right? It's easier to
Mhm.
do that than to actually, well, you trick yourself into thinking that it's easier, right? If I don't bring this thing up, if I don't talk about this thing, you know, you know, you got to act like everything's okay. And see, that's kind of what I have historically done, right? I've had these issues. I've not felt heard, I've felt ignored, I've felt belittled or whatever, and I've not liked it, but I've not felt the strength to say anything, or not felt I don't know, just felt scared to say something. Would I say it the right way? Would I have the right words? Would I be able to fully articulate my feelings, right? Would I be able to do that, And I really attribute a lot of this to like just not learning those skills. And I don't know if it's something that parents actively teach their kids anyway, but like when you grow up in a house where there wasn't any conversation around like your feelings,
Mhm.
or when you felt a way, you were told, I don't want to see that, you better go to your room, I don't
Shut
want
it
to see that. Like, you feel like, well, damn, like I can't tell nobody shit. Because,
I
you know what I
gotta
mean?
deal with this.
Right. And while I don't think that those things were done with that intent, what parents don't understand is that when you shut down your kid's emotion, you do help them create patterns where they don't know how to speak up for themselves. They don't know how to express themselves. They don't know how to address conflict. They don't know how to fully articulate their feelings. And again, I don't have no hard feelings, but this is what I'm dealing with now, right? Like the aftermath of that is this, right? Living in a real world where I'm either an avoider or I'm aggressive, right? There is no in between. For a long time, there was not any in between. It was you avoid, you don't say anything, or somebody push you and you like, oh, you gonna get this motherfucker. You gonna
About to
get
go
this. You know
off,
what I
right?
mean? So, and neither one is healthy, right? So when I think about navigating conflict in my life currently, I think that for me, I don't have any desire to not show up like authentic at this point. Whatever that looks like is the only way I want to show up. I think I battle sometimes with what that might mean for the friendships and how I navigate the conflict. I think the biggest thing for me is what I really struggle with is like, because I've not had lots of experiences where you bring up conflict, y'all resolve it, and y'all move past it. Like I've not had a lot of experiences with that. Like it's either like, y'all stop talking or y'all never have a conversation or you get ghosted. Like, all these different things that happen and I think for me, I think another huge piece about the conflict is that I would always like maybe downplay my feelings like, it ain't that big of a deal, like whatever. And the reality is my feelings might have been hurt. My feelings might have been hurt. I might have been sad. I might have felt belittled or what. Belittled's not really an emotion, but like I might have felt a particular emotion, and what the emotion that's often most easiest to access is like anger or feeling pissed off, but like saying you're hurt, saying that somebody hurt me or I felt betrayed, like those things are not emotions that are easily accessible to people who struggle with like connecting their feelings to an experience, and I think for a long time, because I wasn't ever really given the space to like acknowledge and own my feelings, it was just easier to like, act like they weren't really that big of a deal, or what happened wasn't that big of a deal, or what they did wasn't that serious, or on the flip side of that, like downplaying the experience, like it wasn't that serious, you shouldn't even say anything, like don't even worry about it, like you're gonna look silly or whatever, and so at this point in my life, I don't have any desire to do that. I have a desire to just be honest. Like, I don't even know what I need to say right now. I just feel scary, but like I'm also feeling a little belittled by something that you said, and I'm not trying to make waves, but I'm just trying to be honest about how I feel. Like, I think I never really learned that like when you're expressing your discomfort or your dissatisfaction, you can be honest and say, this is scary to me right now, but I need to say this. This feels uncomfortable, but I don't want to not say anything because I don't want to be a bitch to you next week because I didn't say this thing that's really on my heart, So I think that's what I'm really trying to be, is like not feeling the need to, not feeling the need to discount my feelings when I feel something, when I have an emotion or when I have a feeling about something, really trying to assess like, what is this, And a huge piece for me in conflict is like, is this your shit or is this their shit, right? Would you have responded this way if anyone said this thing? Or are you responding because this particular person said this thing, right?
Yeah.
I think those things are important to kind of figure out. So that's kind of what I do in terms of, I guess at this point when I'm trying to navigate through conflict. But again, I think the struggle for me is not having the space or not feeling validated, right, to my feelings. And so a lot of the work that I'm doing too is like self-trust, right? If you feel something, you don't need nobody to validate that shit. You don't need nobody to come in and say you're right to feel that way. You need to trust that you feel something, and you may not be able to define it, or you may not be able to fully understand what it is, but you feel it and it's there for a reason, and you don't need anyone outside of yourself to validate that feeling. That's huge for me. That's been huge for me for like the past 2 years as I went back to therapy, I guess almost 3 years ago at this point, and I felt like that's really what I've been really committed to working on is self trust. Because I think when I think back to conflict, a lot of the issues that have come up have been because I didn't trust myself. I
Mhm.
overlooked, you know, a feeling. Like when people say your gut feeling, I mean, I used to say that, but I don't think I ever really knew what that meant. And I had a recent experience where I was like, oh, that's what that was. Like now I'm like pissed about something, but I'm more pissed at myself because I had this feeling that was stirring inside of me, but I was so disconnected from my body and so disconnected from what was going on internally that I discounted that and thought it and assumed that like my feelings, my internal feelings were something other than what I was experiencing. So I think for me, I've always been afraid of conflict, you know what I mean? Because the conflict in my house there was never like constructive conflict. There was never like, conflict that was, we talk about it, we come up with a solution, we resolve it, we move on. Like, no.
Mhm.
So that's the struggle for me is like, how do I, kind of unlearn like decades of maladaptive behaviors? you
Mhm.
know, it's a journey. So that's how I would, define how I navigated conflict.
Got another question. So this is about the art of listening. Discuss the importance of active listening in maintaining healthy relationships. Can you recall a moment when being truly heard by a friend made a profound impact on your relationship?
Hmm. So, listening is definitely important. Active listening is definitely important. I think that when we think about communication, I don't think people even consider listening as a part of that. I think people really just think that running a damn mouth is communicating. And listening is a huge part of that, right? And
Mhm.
so I had a breakdown in conflict with someone, and it forced me to think like, damn, was I listening in that conversation? Was I truly listening? And so because this is what I do, and I know this is what I do, I intellectualize things. So like I'm really big in like motivational interviewing, and there's it's a book about listening. And I was like, I'm gonna get this book, and reading the book is a really short book. It's like under 100 pages, and it was really good, right? It really, focused different aspects on like what it truly means to be a good listener. And I hate to say this, but I think like as a therapist, I don't think I've been doing a really good job, at listening, actively listening.
Mhm.
I think that was that. So I didn't just get the book for this particular situation, or I wasn't motivated to get the book for this particular situation entirely. It definitely is something that can help in my career, right? And so the author of the book is one of the developers of motivational interviewing. And so I say all that to say that listening is important because if you're and you people have heard this, right? If you're only listening to reply to what somebody's saying, to rebut what somebody is saying, then you're not truly listening. But I
Mhm.
think the biggest important component around listening is that most people don't even care if you agree with them, right? They don't care if you validate them. They want to know that you heard them, right?
Mhm.
And oftentimes I can overlook the disagreement if somebody says, "Oh, okay, so this is how you were feeling," or "Damn, I didn't realize that I did X, Y, and Z." You can't paraphrase and tell somebody what you heard them say if you're only listening to discount what they said, right? To deflect and to discredit what they said, right? Which often is where we go when we are in those situations where conflict and disagreement and misunderstanding come in. And so I also realize that oftentimes I'm like a defensive listener, right? There's this I think she's a psychologist, Dr. Lerner, and she has wrote lots of books. She did a interview with Brene Brown about listening, and she wrote this book about how to give an apology. And like after one of these situations happened that I was a part of, I was like, it just was interesting to me because again, another thing that we can't really do effectively, right? Because having to apologize means that I gotta like admit that I did something that hurt you, that made you
Mhm.
feel, belittled or made you feel you know, angry or whatever, right? And even if that wasn't my intention, I still gotta apologize. And people like, I don't fuck with that. Like I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? Like why would I do that? I didn't mean that wasn't my intention. And it's
Exactly.
like it doesn't matter that it wasn't your intention,
It
right?
happened.
It happened, right? And I think she was describing what it means to be like a defensive listener. I'm like, damn, I've been doing that shit all up and through my relationships. God damn. Like, how y'all deal with me? Because when I was listening through, I was like, damn, I don't know if I would be dealing with me if this was the other way around. Well, here's the other thing though. Like, we are human. We're gonna fuck up, we're gonna make mistakes. I didn't like hold on to it for too long, but it just made me reflect on like how am I truly showing up in my friendships? Am I truly listening to what they have to say? Am I truly there? Like am I getting it? Am I tapped in to what's being said, or
Mhm.
am I just here to make you feel small and make you feel like your opinion doesn't matter or your feelings don't matter, right? So, I can't really say that I've had a moment where being heard by a friend felt profound or it truly impacted the friendship because, well, you know what? I take that back. Well, I think I had one situation where I don't know if I felt entirely heard in the situation, but I did feel like I was able to express myself like calmly, effectively, and clearly. And
Mhm.
oftentimes when you're frustrated and overwhelmed and upset, like it's really, really hard to do that. Like it's really hard to do that. You have to be like, your feng shui got to be real good because it's
On
it's really
point.
hard. And I think that's one thing that I struggle with is like when I am dysregulated, and I'm not special. Most people when they're dysregulated is like it just doesn't happen. It can't happen. It's like impossible to happen. But it was a situation around like my dad, and I was expressing some feelings with some friends about a situation that had happened between me and him. This was a couple years ago. And I was having a hard time feeling heard in the situation. And I just had to say, after I say what I need to say, I just like, I'm going to like stop talking about this because it's activating me. And like, I think we're not truly understanding each other. I think that we're kind of talking past like the issue. So I don't know if I just think I felt I was able to like fully articulate myself and I could do it in a way that it just felt good that I was able to kind of be clear with my message. But I will say, maybe I haven't felt like a true impact because when you're afraid of conflict, do you even go there? You know what I mean? Do you go there in a way that where something like that can be created? I don't want to make it seem as though like my friendships are fake. I don't think that they are, and I do think that some of my friendships are just chill and we kind of get each other, and so but if I'm being honest, there are a few friendships or maybe a few instances where I overlooked addressing some things because I was afraid of the conflict. And while that was like a while ago, a couple years ago, I think that if I could go back and do things differently, I would because I think that it could have allowed them to see me differently. It could have
Mhm.
allowed me to, again, not be like not dismiss my own feelings. There was quite a bit of times where I felt, and I don't know if it's that I'm sensitive or that they really said or did some things that I just didn't like.
Mhm.
And I think that's sometimes always the challenge for me too is like what's mine and what's not. Like trying to decipher that and discern that sometimes can be difficult for me. But yeah, I mean, I think that if I could do it again, I would have, spoken up so that maybe I could have had a moment where someone truly heard me.
Mhm.
So yeah. What about you?
I mean, I think you kind of like uncovered, and unpacked the difficulty of, just feeling heard and the importance of active listening. One of the things I always say is like, are you listening to actually hear me or are you listening to respond? Right? Because
Yeah.
there's definitely a difference. You know, I'm someone who, and I don't want to say conflict, but I'm someone who likes to talk things out. I don't like the elephant in the room,
Yeah.
because I'm like two sides, right? Like I care a lot and I love very hard, and if I do something that upsets you, I want to talk about it so we can figure it out. But then I also have the other side of me that's like, if you don't care to address this with me, then I won't care, and if I don't care, my I don't care is like wow crazy, like like really wild crazy, like, and this is something that I learned to do when I was a child, is
Mhm.
I literally have like this light switch of my emotions and I could like turn that mess off.
Mm.
It's like two extremes. Like, and I think that's the Cancer in me. And I know like people are always like, oh, what's your sign? But like really, like Cancers feel a lot. Like we are very emotional people
Yeah.
typically. And so like it's either gonna be to that extreme where I'm like heavily like emotionally involved, or I just like you're like dead to me. Like, and you could
Mm.
like literally be in the same room as me. I won't You're like Casper. Like you're not even Casper because Casper was in the room and people could tell. You're like literally like a speck. Like I don't see you.
Mm.
I won't acknowledge you. Like you're dead to me. So like knowing that I have that in me where I could go from those two extremes,
Yeah.
I try my best to like, if we have conflict and we have some type of friendship, to figure it out. But again, like if you are key in like just misunderstanding me and not
Mhm.
wanting to address it and you want to stay in that conflict, and I just don't want. I think the issue for me is that when I was a child I had a lot of situations that I didn't have a say in, and I
Yeah.
had a lot of conflict that I felt very powerless in. And
Mhm.
so I've worked adamantly to make sure that my voice is heard and my no's are respected, and that you know, I speak up for myself,
Yeah.
and that's important to me. Like, and if I feel like my voice is not respected, you don't respect me as a person. And respect looks so different, in different situations, but just like that you value me enough to have dialogue. Because again, I'm not perfect. Like I said, I have my own quirks and things like that. But like if you don't even want to have that discussion, and you are just so gung ho on viewing me in a certain light, I can flip that switch off really quickly and just it's a wrap. So
Mhm.
I try my best to not get to that point because I know that that is in me, and then the friendship is gone. So yeah.
Yeah. I get that too, I get that too. That makes sense. I mean, I think much of it is probably just it's definitely learned behavior, right? That those things
Mhm.
were what you needed to keep yourself safe. And, sometimes in your adult life in your adult life, those things still need to happen to keep yourself, and maybe not safe, you know what I mean? But just there needs to be some distance from me pouring, especially somebody like you who does seem to pour so much of what you have into other people, especially if you care about them. So like if you're not committed to the work of the friendship as much as I am, then I need to cut it off because it could get very unhealthy if I don't. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
get that. That makes sense.
Yeah. And then that's the thing too. Like I have to do it because I get so invested in other people, and
Yeah.
like I said, my love language is really to care about other people and really make sure that they're good. And
Mhm.
I also feel like not everyone deserves full access to you. Like I've learned that, you know, that you need to kind of be careful with who you're pouring, yourself to
Yeah.
into. And again, I feel like there's friends for different seasons, and like sometimes that friend served in that season, and there's no ill will or anything like that, but like we're in a different season, and that's fine. Like we both got something out of it, and that's cool. And then there's friends who literally are gonna be there, ups and downs and whatever, and that's great too. But, like, I don't hold anything against it. Like, if that's what it is, if you're just a friend for that season, like, let's enjoy the season. Like, let's figure it out, and next season, the seasons will change and we'll rotate and go to, our separate ways, and that's fine. And, maybe we'll see each other down the road, or, we'll check in here and there. That's fine. There's just a time and place for everything, right? But I
Right.
think that you just have to be careful with who you pour yourself into, because not everyone is worthy of having that unlimited access, even if
Mhm.
in a season you guys did well together.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. All right. So the next question is about trust and vulnerability. So explore the role of trust and vulnerability in your friendships. How do you build and maintain trust, and what does it mean to be vulnerable with your friends?
So this question, when I read this, the situation popped in my head so quickly.
Mm,
And
do
so
tell.
okay, so I have these two of my best friends. Literally been through so much with them. But this situation literally solidified that they were my girls for life. Like,
Yeah.
they were never getting rid of me. Never, never getting rid of me.
Mm,
So when we graduated from high school, my mom, we had our graduation, and my mom's boyfriend came in town. Okay. And this was my senior year. My house had caught on fire. I had lived in between my one best friend's house and then my other best friend's house. And then my mom finally got her own place, and I moved in with her. And my mom was doing well. She had her own place for a while, and things were like looking okay. And my mom's boyfriend came in town, and he had just gotten his back pay for disability. Okay. So I was so excited because I was like, oh, yes, like he just got all this money. I just graduated. So, like, he's going to give me a good graduation gift, because I was planning to move to Tampa with my cousin. So I was like excited. And my family all came in town for my graduation, and we all went. And my mom, we all went to Applebee's afterwards. And my mom texted my phone, and she's like, oh, I'll, I'll meet you guys up there. Right. And I wasn't thinking that, like, I was having a good old time. And
mhm.
then I called my mom to see where she was at, and she's like, "Oh, you know what? I'm not gonna make it, but you and your friends can stay at the house. Me and her then boyfriend, we're gonna get a hotel room." And I had asked my mom if I could have like a little get together at the house, and prior to him coming in town, she was like, "No, not happening, right?"
Mm,
But then all of a sudden, she was like, "Well, you guys can have the house or whatever. We're gonna go get a hotel room." So I was like, "Oh yes, say no more." Like, told my girls, like, we got the house to ourselves. Like, we were gonna have
mhm.
a good old time. So we did. We literally like had a good old time. My sisters were there. Like, we had a ball. We were all
Mhm.
throughout the like neighborhood or whatever. Had a ball. Well, got home. We all find a place to sleep. Go to bed. It's like 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. My mom's best friend at the time, who was also the landlord, came in screaming and yelling, cussing up a storm, telling everybody to get the F up, get our shit, and leave. And she's
Mm,
just spilling all my mom's business in front of all my friends. Now, mind you,
mm.
my friends, this is like what I talked about with my husband. My friends all knew about my mom, but it was one of those things that was like unspoken. We did not
Yeah.
talk about it in detail.
Yeah.
So she's just going on. She's talking about how my mom was behind several months on rent, and how her boyfriend was supposed to be in town and she couldn't get in touch with him, and she couldn't get in touch with my mom. She never brought her the money. And meanwhile, my house is packed with my friends now. Okay. And I'm
Mm,
talking about some of my friends that was like really good friends, and then some of my friends that, you know, we had just became friends, like not like just became friends, but we weren't as close as others. So she's telling all my business.
mm.
And she's talking about my mom, relapsing, and that she's back on that shit, and just like
Ah.
all, and then she's like telling me and my sisters we can't take nothing, like get our shit that we got on and leave. Like, the house was getting boarded up, and like we were being evicted all in front of my friend. So when I say these girls didn't have no shame, like woke up, somebody screaming and yelling, telling all of my business. These girls got up and just got busy. Like, what do you need us to do? We can grab whatever we could grab, we grabbing it. Like, and two of them had their own cars. So they was like, whatever we could grab, put it in the car, like, let's go. Then
Mhm.
my older sister walks out the house and she realizes that her car is not there. So she automatically knows that my mom still has her car.
Mm.
So my girls was like, look, we'll take this to your aunt's house or whatever. And then my friend Sherelle was like, Dom, like, let's go find your car. My friend literally took my sister. So she took us to my aunt's, dropped off the stuff that we were able to pack into their car. Now, mind you, we're teenagers, okay?
Yeah.
Took it to my aunt's house. She took my sister to multiple crack houses in the freaking neighborhood to find my sister's car, and like literally
Wow.
was like knocking on crack houses to get my sister, like to find my mom. Like,
Mm.
and my sister ended up being, asking if my mom was there. She wouldn't come to the door, but my sister saw her car and she ended up getting her keys and leaving.
Yeah.
And even to this day, I talk to them about like how they never sat there and like had a discussion. There was no discussion about like, damn, your mom's on crack or anything like that. Like it was like go mode, and just showed up and like, how can we support you? And even when I was like, and I was embarrassed, like I was embarrassed because it was a part of
Yeah.
like, it was a part of my life that I didn't talk about. Like people
Mhm.
knew, and I knew people knew because it wasn't a big town, but like people
Mhm.
just didn't talk about it.
Right.
And I felt like someone had literally came in and was like, let's open up all these damn curtains and doors, and like everybody's gonna be in your house and like they're gonna know all your dirty laundry.
Mm.
And for them to just like step up and be kids and be like, look, we're here for you. Like, we're not gonna talk about you just getting evicted or whatever. Like,
Right.
joked about it like later on,
I mean,
but
yeah, yeah.
it was just so dope because I wasn't used to being vulnerable in that aspect at all. I had just went a few months prior, had just lost literally my home. And then like I said, I was staying with, two of my friends on and off. So it was just like a lot. And just to see that my girls like knew what was going on, did not talk about it, didn't make jokes or nothing, was just like let's figure this out. Like I was like, yeah, we're in for the long haul. Like, and we even now still will talk. Like, and I'll tell them, like, I always bring that up of like what that moment meant to me. You know what I'm saying? Like to literally go through something so traumatic and so someone who's not used to being vulnerable and
Mhm.
having no control over what was being shared. Um, it was like a very important time in my life, and they showed up and stepped up. And like I said, if you've ever seen a crack house, like having someone
Yeah.
be willing to not go to one, but go to multiple crack houses,
Right.
to look for someone's parent is a lot.
Mhm.
So very, very appreciative of that situation, and that kind of just cements it, you know, I could trust them, and they could see the ugliness of my life, and there was no judgment there. Like, and I think that they even shared like, when we talked about it later on, they even like opened up about things that were going on in their life. And like, don't think
Mm.
that everyone has these perfect lives. Like we all have our
Yeah.
own shit. And so like
Mhm.
that just made me feel like, damn, my life ain't that crazy.
I mean, right. Like I'm not in this by myself, or
Yeah. Yeah.
like, everybody got something.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you?
I will say this one was kind of hard for me. I will say that what has helped, I guess what has helped to be vulnerable with my friends is not feeling judgment, right? I think being vulnerable it's important to me and it's difficult for me. So I hold these, the both and, right? It's both important and necessary for your friendships, and it's tough and it's difficult and scary. And so the moments where I have allowed myself to share, aspects of my life or aspects of things that have just been challenging and overwhelming, I've not felt like judgment. And I've
Mhm.
even felt like, how can we help you? How can I help you solve this? You know what I mean? Or like, if I can't help you solve it, like, what do you need? What can I do while you're going through such a difficult or overwhelming situation? And I think that's important for me because I'm not someone who like shares a lot about, especially if I don't mind sharing things, but generally if I don't, if it's something that's super painful, I to be honest, I'm probably going to share it with my mom before I share with anybody. Like that's, and I just think that's a testament to how strong our relationship is. I know I'm not going to get judgment, and she's not going to judge anybody. She's not going to treat anybody differently. Like she's just not going to do that. And like she's really my friend. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like I just feel lucky and blessed for that. But if I'm sharing something that is truly painful and truly overwhelming and just feels like I'm exposing, because that's what vulnerability is. Like you're
Yeah.
exposing, it's literally like, you're bearing your emotions, like you're exposing them, right? You're naked, right? You're sharing the emotional piece of you in a way that you can't cover it up. You can't hide it. And that is, it's difficult at times because I didn't grow up with the space to share my true feelings. I just have learned to deal with them on my own. And obviously that's clearly not helpful when you are, in a relationship with anybody. You know what I mean? Like it's not helpful, because no one wants, on the flip side, no one wants to feel like they're always sharing their shit, but you ain't sharing nothing either.
Right. Right.
Right? Like people want to feel, and not because they want something to hold over you, but they want to feel like this is like a relationship that not only can I share with you what I'm going through, but that you trust me enough to share with me what you're going through. And so I think for me, just not feeling like I'm going to be judged for it, or judged for what I'm going through. And I think one thing that I tend to do, because I do have friends who do come to me, and who do share things with me. And one thing that I try to remind myself is like, don't judge them for what they're coming to you with. Don't, because you never know when you're going to be on the receiving end where you might need a listening ear, and you don't want to be judged. You know what I mean? Where you don't want, your situation or your circumstance to be judged or discussed or any of that. So, I think that's what has helped in my friendships in terms of trust and vulnerability. But again, like I said, not always having the practice, because vulnerability is a practice. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Trusting people and like walking in a way that is trustworthy. That's a practice. That if you're not taught that, you're not just born with those things. You're not born with the capacity to like be vulnerable, and you're not born with the capacity to be trustworthy or to exhibit trusting behaviors. Like that's something that you have to practice. And that's why, when I was speaking earlier about being a parent, like that's why it's so important for me. That's why I really take that shit serious, because I really want my son to have all the tools that I didn't. And again, I can't give him everything. I know that. But I do attribute a lot of the areas of my life where I struggle. I do attribute a lot of that to, the way I was raised, you know what I mean? The way I grew up, and I don't have any ill feelings, but I think about those situations, and I know that if I would have had certain experiences, if I would have had certain, a practice where I could be vulnerable and not be judged, or I could share my true feelings, even if it hurt my caregiver, you know what I mean? Like, I think I would have been better off. And so, that's just an area that I'm really still trying to strengthen, because it's not it's nowhere near what I want it to be.
Yeah.
So,
I have another question for you. So
all
this is
right.
about support systems. Friends often serve as pillars of support during challenging times. Sharing experience with a friend's support played a crucial role in helping you overcome adversity.
Huh. Let's see. I think I have one friend. I had already kind of been thinking about going to therapy the first time. So this was probably in 2000 and maybe 2015 or 2016. I'd already been like toying around with the idea, and I was having like some counter transference with my clients, and I was talking with this friend who I worked with about the experience, and I we got on the subject of like my childhood and like just things that I had experienced. And I remember, you know, telling her about some of my experiences, some that she could relate to. And I remember writing those things off as like, oh, well, they happened to me, but I deserve those things. Or, I did things for the outcome to be what it was. And much of that, we had a lot of similarities in terms of how we were raised and how we were parented. And she had already been kind of unpacking, some of her childhood traumas. And I don't think at that point I had even acknowledged that like I did have any childhood trauma. I was just like, it just is what it is. It just happened to me, and like look at me now, and I'm good. I'm fine. It happened, and like it didn't change my life, in a negative way. But I think that's because I think I had those feelings because I was so disconnected to how like those experiences did impact me. And again, at the time I was fairly young, I was probably in my mid 20s, and you still don't really know shit then. And I thought at that time, I thought I knew everything. So I think talking to her about my experiences made me think like, damn, like, it's funny because like when you tell people things that you went through, it doesn't sound like it don't sound fucked up until you tell somebody else and they're like, huh? And you like, what? Like, what's wrong with that? Like, and it wasn't like she was judging me.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we normalize our childhood experiences, right? We have to normalize it to make sense of it to go on. If
Mm-hmm.
you don't normalize what you went through, or you don't find some way to make peace with what happened, that's kind of the brain is designed that way. The brain is designed to protect you in that way when you're experiencing some traumatic event or when you're experiencing trauma. So those things needed to happen. I needed to find a way to like protect myself from what I was going through. And I think that's why I didn't necessarily see those experiences as abuse or as trauma. I just was like, well, all my friends kind of went through this, and like that's just what we went through. It's just what happened in my community. It's just what happened in my neighborhood. Like it's just what happened to my cousins. Like it's just what happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was also at the time I had started really thinking about one particular childhood traumatic event that I really wanted to begin to unpack because I had been really ignoring it. And again, I think I was showing up in ways that made me feel like maybe I didn't really need to address it because I was fine.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't. So having that conversation with her, I felt like it was the first time I had really like thought maybe I do need to go to therapy. Like maybe I do need to really kind of address some of these issues that I didn't really think were issues at the time, right? But I think because she's a little bit older than me, she had already kind of been working through those her own experiences, and I would think it was just helpful. It was just helpful to talk to somebody else who had been going through it. None of my friends were going to therapy at the time. My generation at that age isn't like the generation now at 25. Them 25s, them 20s, they going to therapy. And they
Right.
on Twitter and they on TikTok talking about it. You know what I mean? Like none of
Exactly.
my friends at that time were going to therapy, and they damn sure wasn't talking about it. you know so I think having that moment with her was helpful because it really made me start to think, maybe it would be worth really, talking about these things in more detail. So, what about you?
I would say, um, I've had a lot of conversations with my two best friends, and one of the things that I really like about our friendship is with them being vulnerable is very easy for me. It's
Mhm.
not with most people, but I would say being vulnerable with them is easy. And I would say even being vulnerable with you, like,
Mhm.
I'll check in and I'll just like, Dom, I need someone level-headed, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
can you give me a moment? But like I have core people that I I have used, you know, in prior situations, there's been I won't say like a test, but I will give people a glimpse of something to see how they're going to react to it because I do think that, although we all do have life experiences and go through different things, I will say I do have a large amount of trauma and chaos that I have experienced. And I don't think that everyone is equipped to be able to unpack that.
Yeah.
I also think that when people oftentimes meet me and interact with me, for the most part, they don't fully know what my background is and what that trauma holds. And so I think that it can be off-putting to some people if I start to uncover just some of the deeper parts of me because
Yeah.
they're like, "Wait a minute, I didn't know that was going on," and just
Right.
um and it can be met with different things. And so I'm very particular of who I share those parts of me with, right? Um
Mhm.
but in having these dialogues with these main groups of people, you know, there's been so many different scenarios. One of the ones that's more recent is like, the loss of my mother that was very sudden. But the thing that kind of made that situation so difficult was not only did I lose my mom very suddenly, but my mother had custody and had my sister's children in her care. And so when she passed, it was one of those things where there were now these children who needed to kind of be taken care of, right? And at the time, both of my sisters who are the mothers of these children, were going through their own things, right? Not only were they going through their own things, but now they also have this significant loss. And if you're already not in a good headspace mentally, with this significant grief, it was just like the nail on the coffin, right?
Yeah.
And so I went from, just me and my husband and our dog Dash to now losing my mom, which was so heavy and so sudden, to also trying to figure out how I then solve all these kids that I knew I could not take. Like, I could not take every one of them. And trying to come up with a scenario that worked, but also having to deal with, my mom had no contest of them being in her care, but my mom was also a yes person. Like, she didn't set very healthy boundaries, and I do, which can be very combative at times, especially for people who are not used to having boundaries or respecting them. And so it went from my mom being very easygoing to now I'm here and now I have to fight for what's right for these kids, right?
Mhm.
Um, so there was just like a very heavy thing. And I remember I think I talked to you, I spoke to,
Mhm.
my two best friends, I spoke to my colleagues. I have three colleagues at work who I consider my friends. Spoke to them about it because I was just like, it was a lot. It was a lot all at once. And I was really struggling on how to unpack it. Losing my mom, getting the kids, trying to figure out what was best for them, then also having to deal with a custody battle,
Yeah.
um,
That
with
shit was
a
wild.
a parent who was not an active parent at all, but just being like manipulative and nasty,
Mhm.
and just like the difference, dealing with the legal system that, you know, one doesn't really value, I won't even say value, but acknowledge a sister's rights.
Mhm.
Dealing with that, dealing with a system that is very confusing. It's like literally they were speaking a different language, trying to deal with that and deal with lawyers and who, again, different languages. So it was just a lot. And then also still being present and doing my job, which is in the mental health field. So I was dealing with,
Mm.
people who were calling in for their own issues, whether it be having suicide ideation or needing to get connected with a higher level of care because of substance use concerns, dealing with their own grief, their own family dynamic issues. So also dealing with that. And then in addition to that, I'm also the team lead for our disruptive event management group. So that is where people will call in or organizations call in who have dealt with like very, sad things, whether it be, a colleague has passed away or a colleague's family member has passed away, but also like school shootings and just,
Mhm.
devastation. So it was so many different things that I was being pulled in and just trying to find a place to be like, one, I'm not superwoman. And
Mhm.
two, I'm used to being someone who, even when I don't know how to maneuver through something, I usually present in a way that I'm gonna figure the shit out.
Mhm.
And I'm not gonna
Yeah.
lie, like for a moment, I was so lost in not even knowing, being able to come up with like actionable plans of what this looked like. I just felt like I was just getting swallowed, like and
Yeah.
drowning. And I remember just having like conversations with you and, my other friends and them just being like, "Can we just acknowledge that this is a hot ass mess? Like,
Yeah.
can you just take a moment and be like, you know what? This is not fair and this is a lot." And acknowledge that you're functioning. Like you feel like you're drowning, but you're actually like wading water. Like you're not drowning. You can
Yeah.
breathe. Like acknowledge that. Acknowledge what you have made it through and where you're at. And although you feel like you're drowning, like you're not, right? And I think like
Mhm.
that accountability and that acknowledgement of seeing me and seeing me fully and just knowing like this shit is rough and there is no like nobody was passing out handbooks telling me
Nope.
like, look, you do like start from here. Nobody was doing that. I was winging it. Okay. But
Mhm.
also like just like I think the most important aspect was like my friends were mirrors to me. Like they held up
Mm.
mirrors to me in those moments and be like, remember who you are. Remember what
Mm.
you've gotten through. Like
Yeah.
and also acknowledge that this shit is hard. Like
Yeah.
this is not something that you wake up and think like, okay, I can figure this out. Like, no, anyone will be struggling right now. Like, and
Yeah.
you have a right to be struggling right now. But like, you're
Mhm.
not alone. Like, what do you need? Like, but remember who you are. And I think like it was those moments that I needed to like get me to be like, okay, like maybe we don't look at it as like a whole big old pile. Like maybe we need to look at it piece by piece and try to unpack it. And like that's what you've been able to do thus far in your life. And that's what you need to do in this situation. Because if you just look at it as a pile, it's gonna look like a landfill and there's like literally somebody drop you in a landfill and gives you like a toothbrush and tell you to clean up. Like you're gonna be over
Yeah.
there like, what the hell? Like
You know,
and
like
then
a
just have
toothbrush.
yeah, but I think like just those moments of giving that mirror, reminding me who I was, reminding of what I've been able to get through, what adversity I was able to, overcome, but not only just overcome, but literally conquer that shit, right?
Yeah, man.
I needed that reminder because I was lost.
Mhm.
I was really, really lost. So I feel like those friendships and that's a perfect example of those friendships being like, girl, like wake up, throw some water on your face, like take a break, acknowledge it's a hot mess, but now we got to figure out like where do we go from here?
Yeah.
And that was definitely needed.
Absolutely. That was a rough time. And I think those friends were absolutely right. Like what you were navigating, bro, like
It's
I
not for the
I
weak.
don't even know how you and I don't think I don't know if we ever get through it, like, and I guess I mean like get over it. I don't think you ever get over it, but it's definitely been much been more calmer
Yeah.
since, some of the events of all of the things you were navigating, those things have subsided. But I mean, I don't even know how you were doing that shit. Like I don't.
Girl.
I really don't. And sometimes it does take people who know us. When you said that they were holding up a mirror to me, I think that's so it's so profound because like, mirrors reflect, right? They reflect
Mhm.
what people see and what people know about you, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we need that mirror, right? We need people to remind us that what you're going through and what you're navigating through is not it's not easy. And so the mere fact that you are even making it with all the things that you're going through is like remarkable, like it's I know that it doesn't feel like it in the moment. It feels like 10,000 bricks is on your back and you're like, "Bitch, I need to get up." Like,
Right. Like, wait,
like
who is
help me up.
he?
Right. But like I think for people who know you and know what you've gone through and also like what you are going through, but sometimes it's hard for us to see it when we're in it. It's hard for us to fully
Mhm.
comprehend what we're going through when we're in it. When we're in
Yeah.
it, we're just trying to get through
You're in
the
survival
day.
mode.
Yeah, so it's really hard to take perspective when you're truly in it. So it was so and I remember a few times saying that like, "Girl, like, are you okay?" Like, this is a lot, It's a
Right.
lot of time, it's a lot of energy. You're still a human who got your own stuff. Now you're taking on things that you couldn't have planned for and it's never ending. Like this is it's a lot, so it's just nice that you were able to get those reminders from all sides because sometimes we definitely need that.
Yeah, and yeah, I was definitely, I'm continuously thankful for that because I think, like I said, friendships are so essential to just functioning in your life,
Yeah,
and we
for
all
sure.
need those moments where we have people who know us and hold up that mirror because life can get hard and we can get so caught up in surviving that it's just like as just like breathing, right? We don't even think about doing it, it just happens. But like when you're fighting so many battles, you need someone to be like, look, like you're here, like you're existing, like
Yeah.
this ain't easy, but you're
Nope.
doing it, right? Like
Mhm.
and you can keep doing it because I think it's just important. So I'm very thankful for that example because I think that it I needed those reminders to
Mhm.
bring me back to, like I said, I was in a very dark place,
Yeah.
and when you feel like you're falling down like just this bottomless pit in darkness, you need reminders of being like you're not falling, like, or at least if you are falling, that's fine too, but, like, there is some type of ground at some point, and you will hit
Mhm.
that, and then you can build yourself back up.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.